Most people treat strength and mobility as two completely different things. They lift heavy weights to get stronger, and then they stretch afterwards hoping to get a little bit more flexible. But what if I told you you could do both at the same time? Kettlebells allow you to load movements through deep ranges of motion, helping you develop real-world strength, stability, and mobility simultaneously. So today, I'm going to show you some of the best kettlebell mobility exercises to help you build a stronger body, stronger joints, increase your range of motion, and become more athletic with every single rep. So if you're ready, let's gonna have some fun. One of the first things people test out when they're asked about their mobility is their ability to fold forward and touch their toes, or if they're a little bit more advanced, their ability to get into a complete pike position. And no exercise combines that better with strength than classic Jefferson curl, in which we go into complete spinal flexion, rounding our spine and letting that weight pull us deeper and deeper into a posterior chain stretch before we strengthen every single muscle in our posterior chain to reverse this movement in a controlled fashion. While working on the floor with light weights is a good way to start. As you progress in both strength, flexibility, and control, you will be able to start working on some sort of elevation and let yourself be pulled deeper and deeper into a complete pike position, starting to add more and more resistance and being able to reverse out of it, now combining a maximum amount of posterior chain flexibility with a lot of posterior chain strength. And most importantly, for people who want to avoid injury and work on overall health as they get older, you are teaching your spine to become resilient and resistant to injury in compromised position, in which we are using a lot of resistance in a flexed spinal position or a rounded spine, which you have been probably told to never do. What's smarter than not doing that is simply doing it in a controlled manner until you are resistant to injury. When it comes to these positions, next to posterior chain flexibility, most people struggle with getting into a deep or a resting squat, which means that they lack a lot of hip mobility. And guess what? Our last exercise can be built upon by combining our Jefferson curl, as usual, full range of motion and complete control when it comes to the resistance we are using. And at the very bottom of this movement, now we're going to switch into a squatting position, which is going to pull our upper body deeper into this squat, open up our hips a lot and lengthen our adductors and all the tissue surrounding our hip joints, which is going to help us in the long run switch out of and into deeper resting squat positions. Posterior chain flexibility and strength, as well as hip mobility and strength surrounding all the muscles that are even remotely connected to hip movement when it comes to flexion and extension. And since most people, due to our modern day lifestyle, have adopted what I like to call a goblin posture when sitting, shoulders slumped and upper back rounded, which leads to a lot of lacking mobility in our shoulders, guess what? We're not done with the Jefferson curl yet, because our new starting position is going to help us open up our chest and shoulders by simply extending our arms above our head and then letting them be pulled back, opening up our thoracic spine, lengthening our pectorals and our delts, as well as our triceps and all the muscle insertions surrounding our rotator cuff. Holding for a second or two, enjoy the stretch and repeat. Forward, Jefferson, hip, flexion, hip, extension, strengthening our entire spinal musculature, strengthening our shoulders, our arms, opening up our chest, and holding for a handful of seconds before we repeat a handful of times. Now having incorporated pretty much full body mobility within a single movement pattern. Now, while the Bulgarian Split Squat is a very well known and beloved strength exercise for our legs, its mobility benefits are arguably even more impressive, because once we have started working on this base where we lengthen our hip flexors and our quads, the deeper we go into this movement. The true goal of our Bulgarians should be not only increasing the resistance we use, but also increasing our range of motion by elevating our front leg, which is going to allow us to move deeper and deeper into this anterior chain stretch surrounding our hip joint and building a lot more strength for our front leg when it comes to our quads due to an increased range of motion. And the same thing goes for our glute musculature, lengthening it at the lowest point in our front leg and strengthening it massively in both sides throughout the entire movement pattern. Additionally, I'm not just using a single weight on one side because I need to hold the mic, but also because this is going to force our core and our musculature to stabilize a lot more due to the asymmetry of the weight distribution, which is going to make this exercise even more effective. And taking this to the next level, adding shoulder mobility as well, we can move the weight above our head, pulling our arm backwards, moving into thoracic extension, starting with a short range of motion, getting used to this movement pattern with the overhead weight and all the flexibility in our anterior chain in our upper body, before now combining it with all the benefits of the elevation for our front leg as well. Massive mobility benefits in our hip joints, our knee joints, our ankle joints, and our rotator cuff, and massive strength for our lower upper body, and a lot of core inclusion, not just for stabilization, but in general. As usual, this video is sponsored by you. You are my only sponsor. By liking this video, subscribing to the channel, watching the whole video until the end, maybe sharing it, hell, maybe even you're crazy enough to leave a comment. That is the only type of sponsorship I could ever ask for. And I will diligently use the ad money to buy even more gourmet cat food. And when it comes to the combination of strength with mobility, you will be hard-pressed of finding an exercise that is as effective as the cossack squat, especially once we go through the full progression. Once again, one-sided load for stabilization requirements from our core, wide stance, level number 1 being able to bring our hips all the way down to knee height with our feet flat and parallel, maximizing our adductor flexibility. And of course, working on both sides due to the asymmetrical nature of this movement pattern. Level number 2, moving deeper into a squatting position and into external rotation into our extended leg. So we have a rotation in our hip added to the extension and flexion we've been doing so far. Reversing, and we're always raising our heel to maximize foot musculature strength with even more stabilization from our core, and adding even more strength requirements from our hips and even more mobility. We will start bringing our knee down, adding hip extension, maximizing the posterior chain strength. We can start building in our glutes and our spinal erectors by leaning back, holding for a second, and learning how to reverse out of this movement and into the other direction carefully, if necessary, with your hands on the floor until you have mastered the movement pattern. And I'm gonna add this one as a goal for those of you who want to be super advanced, not just when it comes to mobility, but also when it comes to its combination with strength. Once we have reached depth and placed our knee, we will push our hips backwards until we are fully flat on the floor with our butt and our extended leg. And then we're gonna fold forward towards the extended side for maximum posterior chain flexibility, and then requiring a lot of strength from our back to reverse this movement, a lot of strength from our hips and legs to get back up. And of course, we are working asymmetrically, so we have to do this into both directions separately. Fold forward as close as you can. Use your back strength to reverse, use your hip flexor strength and your leg strength to get back up. And I would highly advise to work on this without resistance, and even better with assistance, until you have full range of motion and complete control, as well as a mild understanding of how it feels to go through this movement all by yourself without any resistance, before you can do it with added weight. And finally, connecting our upper body and lower body through our core. We've got beginner-friendly quadruped position exercises, starting with your knees on the floor, getting into a complete rotation into one and a complete rotation into the other direction, strengthening all our core musculature and our spinal musculature until you develop the necessary strength to do the same thing with your knees raised, and increasing your range of motion, turning as far in and out as you can, maximizing the engagement of our core, not just for going through the rotation, but for stabilizing our entire body throughout the movement pattern. Of course, a more beginner-friendly variation, kneeling on the floor, adding the tiniest bit of resistance at the top, and over time, as we progress in strength, we can now add shoulder and arm strength by extending more and more. And as our range of motion and strength increases, this exercise will get exponentially harder and exponentially more effective for our spinal and core musculature overall, and include a lot of deltoid and arm strength. Of course, we can do the same thing by adding both strength and stabilization for our lower body, starting in a lunging position with our rotations, adding hip flexor and quad flexibility as well. So a lot of hip mobility, and once again, increasing our rotations by extending our arm and requiring more and more strength to stabilize and to go through a longer movement pattern. And finally, adding some sort of rotation for our shoulders as well, which is going to help us open up our chest and our deltoids a little bit more for increased shoulder mobility. And once again, adding some stabilization from our core, especially once we start moving to more and more resistance in this exercise. And there you go. With just a handful of exercises, we've targeted pretty much every single joint in our body, worked on increasing our range of motion while working on our stability and decreasing our risk of injury, not just through strengthening in compromised positions, but also by combining flexibility with strength and coordination, which is going to help us with all kinds of other fitness endeavors and real world application as well. And these are already enough to help you build a nice and solid foundation as you start adding more and more advanced exercises. With that said, sadly, that's all the time I've left you today. However, we do stuff like that very regularly, which means I'll probably see you soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo. Peace out.